I'm going to kind of hold like the introductory stuff, but I really want to just dig into you don't have, or you didn't, I should say, have like a typical technology background. It was not probably something you ended up thinking you would be working in, or a space or the startup world or anything like that. So why entrepreneurship, and why kind of make the venture into technology and specifically fintech?
Yeah, happy to answer that. And I never thought I would be an entrepreneur, similar to what Michael was saying about it being a dirty word. I went to Queen's Commerce and everyone wanted to either be an investment banker or a management consultant. I see some people nodding if you went to business school. Like, that's why you went to business school, right? You were going to get a corporate job. At least that was for me. I had student loans. And I remember in the resume book, because that was a thing, it was every graduate had a little resume, a photo, and what they were interested in. And one person put entrepreneurship, and everyone was like, why would you want to be an entrepreneur? It wasn't really a thing. And so, yeah, it wasn't ever anything that I thought about, but I heard a really great pitch from my co-founder. And for me, it was really solving a career problem. And that career problem was that I wanted to do something where I personally felt like I was making a difference. I also wanted to do something where I felt at scale, the organization I was working for was making a difference. And at one point, sort of middle of my career, it was I can either work for a really small organization where I would have personal impact, but I didn't think that where it was going to have broader impact, or I could work for a big organization that was having really big impact, but I would be a tiny cog in the wheel of this giant machine. And starting my own company was actually a way, especially doing a startup and something that was more innovative, of a small company having big impact and me sort of growing along with that.
So you now are kind of venturing away from what you typically thought that you would be doing. And what was also, like, maybe aside from the fact that you said it was like solving a career problem, like, was it also like, just, did you see like industry trends? Did you see like market opportunities? Like, obviously fintech is, like, I use the word finicky because it's so like regulatory. There's so many barriers, I think, to building something within that space. So what about maybe just the market in general? Did you see an opportunity, and what about it just made you really excited and thinking you were going to just do something really massive?
Yeah, for me, it was seeing like one stat in particular, which is that Canadians held $80 billion in credit card debt. I think that number is now 120. And for me, that was both a symbol of a big problem as well as a big opportunity. So, it's like some of that, obviously, people pay off. That's like the sort of balance. But I think at one point we calculated that Canadians spend like $30 million a day in credit card interest. Just felt like a big problem, but also with the amount of money that was involved, an opportunity to build a big business. So for me, it was those two things together: an opportunity to make a difference and do something in people's personal lives that would be really impactful, but also to build a big business while doing it. Thank you.
So what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in getting Borrowell off the ground?
Yeah. So I would say one of the biggest challenges was actually getting funding. We started Borrowell as a personal lender. So we do raise equity like most businesses have to do to fund your operations. Our product was actually money, and we needed someone to give us money to lend out. Yeah. It was one of those things where like the product was giving someone $10,000 or $15,000. And it was very hard because those are two different groups of people. Typically, the people that are funding, equity for startups are very different from people who are willing to give out loan capital. And this is very personal because the person who was really instrumental in that passed away over the weekend, a guy named Andrew Moore. I think it's been in the news. He was the CEO of Equitable Bank and passed away very suddenly over the weekend. But it was Andrew who really took a chance on my co-founder and me. He, at the time, was also CEO of Equitable Bank, and they were willing to not only give us lending capital and help out because they were a lender, they do a lot of mortgages, they had that expertise. They didn't have expertise in funding startups, but they were willing to do that and write our first equity check. And I think if it weren't for him, others wouldn't have come on board, and Borrowell may not exist today. So anyways, shout out to Andrew, and very sad. I think there's been lots written about him and how big of a contributor he was within the fintech space.
And Borrowell is obviously one of the most recognizable like, fintech brands and most well known in our space, especially within Canada and what you're doing within fintech. So, how do you take this really great idea? You're solving a problem. You're now kind of like have a strategy when it comes to like how you're going to fundraise and how you're going to get the capital, obviously, to be able to be lending it out. So, what does now further beyond, you have kind of the building blocks, like how do you scale this idea? How do you get customers to trust you? How do you get, employees to just like to join, to build? Like, how do you kind of get this machine like really moving full speed?
Yeah, it was really tough because I felt like as a lender, it would be easier to get people on board and customers on board. We're literally, like giving out money. But it was tougher than we thought it would be to find the right kinds of people. So it's true that a lot of people came, but we weren't able to approve them. Getting the right kind of person that we were willing to approve was actually very, very tough. And what I had underestimated was the importance of having to build trust with people, even if we weren't asking for their money. We were literally giving them money, but they still didn't want to be scammed. They didn't want to be giving away their personal information. And in Canada, the banks have been around for so long and everyone grew up knowing about the banks that they just had like a really tight hold. And I think people just didn't want to trust necessarily a company they'd never heard of at the time. So the big unlock for us really was starting to give credit scores away for free. And I think that was something that people were curious enough about, that people were curious about across the sort of like spectrum of different credit scores. And so that was like a big unlock for us. That was the product market fit moment, to harken back to what Michael was saying.
Buzzword.
And I think it's sort of like you sort of like know it when you see it. It's like very hard to understand if you have it. But for us, it was like very clear when we launched a very crappy MVP, a free credit score, which was we literally flashed a 3-digit number on a screen and we updated it once every 3 months. Maybe it was your 3-digit number, maybe it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like you would have no idea. But there was a ton of demand for people to understand what their credit score was, and it really took off after that.
Building a team is so key in, driving growth for a startup. How did you approach building the team at Borrowell and retaining really great people?
Yeah. In the early days, it really was just like more through our own personal networks. And I think that's because you do have to have this huge amount of trust. But very early on, diversity was really important to us. We recognized that if we just went within our own networks, we weren't going to necessarily get like the right mix of people that we wanted. So we were pretty focused on values from the beginning of like the kind of company that we wanted to build, the culture we wanted to have. And I think we tried to make that very clear. But yeah, a lot of it was like selling people on the dream, giving people an opportunity to like do real exciting work and make an impact.
Kind of what like triggering this question, because we heard a fair amount of like AI. I mean, I know everybody's just they're tired of talking about it, but it's super important and obviously something that every single founder in business is considering. So maybe in this case, like agentic AI, LLMs, like how is AI being embedded, used, implemented, like to advance kind of Borrowell, and like what is that looked like with just like the adoption of all of this?
Yeah. So I think it's really, really exciting when it comes to personal finance, the possibilities of agentic AI, and a lot of the infrastructure, at least from like a cross industry perspective, like isn't quite there yet. But I think the promise of it is super exciting. And the reason for that is because finances are personal, right? Like what you want and what, if someone asks what you want, it may not be apparent until you've had like a few different conversations about it. That's like very personalized. Your own personal situation and your financial history is like very individual. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to be able to actually take that level of personalization up a level. I think the other thing about personal finance and the financial just sort of sector in general is there's a lot of friction in it, right? Like it's like not that easy. There's a lot of fraud. So there's a lot of stuff that like hoops that you have to go through. So I also do think that with agentic AI, taking a lot of the friction out of actually switching financial products and getting the best financial products for folks. If anyone's gotten a mortgage recently, I think that's still a very painful process. I think that also has like immense potential.
Just given like you're so immersed in fintech and in the market, like do you see Borrowell like not necessarily maybe making a pivot, but how do you see it like evolving even just beyond to what the business model and the product is now? And how do you see it kind of further advancing as things are advancing so quickly?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have that is an advantage is that we do have a relationship with 10% of Canadians. So we have 3.8 million members, and we also have a high degree of trust from them. So I am excited to see if there are other kinds of recommendations or other ways that we can sort of like use the trust and the data that we have to recommend things. So this isn't a prediction of like necessarily where we're going to be, because I do think there is so much within financial services just in terms of all the different kinds of products that people use over a lifetime. It's very complex. But I do think, there are other like kinds of recommendations around just, things outside financial services, whether that's shopping or other like retail or, it's like cell phone plans we've like contemplated. There's like lots of other things in terms of like, who do you trust for recommendations?
Running a small or mid-sized tech company? Then you need more than spreadsheets and basic tools. You need Sage Intacct, the all-in-one cloud platform for accounting, ERP, and financial management. From startup to scale up, Sage Intacct helps you grow faster, automate your workflows, gain real-time visibility, and scale with confidence. It's more flexible than NetSuite, more powerful than QuickBooks, and delivers ROI fast, up to 250% with payback in less than 6 months. Ranked number 1 in customer satisfaction for 8 years straight. That's not luck, it's Sage Intacct. Visit Sage Canada and take control of your growth.
I'm curious about your philosophy on effective leadership in a fast-paced, evolving industry like fintech, and especially when it comes to, failure and pivoting, which I'm sure happens a lot.
Yeah. I think that it's really important to have like a posture of learning. And I think that's something that we've really emphasized, and love what you're doing to sort of like make the failure more of a normal thing. I think a lot of us who've been conditioned to like do well in school and like get good marks on exams, like you're sort of judged on being right, not on being wrong. But I do think that if you switch the framing to be about like, are we learning as much as we can? Then it's not about sort of like winning and failing. It's like, it's okay. If this wasn't successful, then what did we learn and how do we apply that? And I do think it's like more of a journey. You do want to win and be successful in the long term, but I think the path includes a lot of failing and learning.
I think it's really interesting too that you really did like make this like hard pivot into like entrepreneurship. What has been the most surprising thing since you've kind of come in and been like involved in the building process of something that is just so massive now? What's surprised you the most about this journey and becoming an entrepreneur?
Michael alluded to this a bit, but I just think like how emotional it is, especially at the beginning, and how much can happen in a single day. So I would go home and my husband would be like, so what happened today? Because there would always be something. And I think in corporate life, it's just like a lot more even keeled of stuff just doesn't happen to the same degree of like a competitor called into a reporter with like a negative review about our product. You know what I mean? It was like, there were just wild things that happened, especially in the early days. So I think the highs are high, the lows are low, and you have to sort of like modulate that when, I think, again, coming from a bigger organization or like non-entrepreneurs, there was like a lot less of that.
I just so follow up to that. Burnout is such a key theme with entrepreneurship. How did you in the early days, when you're like working to get something off the ground, how did you take care of your own mental health, and how did you keep yourself from burning out, or did you ever burn out?
Yeah, I think I wasn't that good at it actually at the beginning. I have learned, and I'm much better now. for me, it wasn't mental health. It was actually physical health even more, in that I just didn't sleep that much. I had 2 young kids at home. And so I felt like I was just working multiple shifts, right? It was like the early morning shift was like with the kids and getting everyone out the door and myself out the door. Then it was like work at the office, come home, do like the sort of like after work dinner thing routine, try to get the kids to bed, and then like go back to work. And so I just didn't get enough sleep. I got like pretty sick. And in the early days, I think there's just so much that doesn't get done if you don't do it yourself, that it feels like there's all this pressure of, stuff just doesn't get done. I feel like the culture within tech is actually much healthier now. It's like, not that you'll sleep when you're dead, or, it's like, that like grind culture that was very popular. So I do think that there is a healthier culture. It's a marathon, not a sprint, building a company. And so you have to go at a pace that you can maintain over a decade, not one that you can just sort of like keep up for 3 months. I think it's like really important to understand that like my own value and my own self-worth and your value and your self-worth is not tied up with whether or not your business is successful. So I do think that having that perspective of my family is important, there are other things to me that are important outside of the business, is healthy perspective that keeps things in check, while at the same time you're going to work 110% on your business during the time that you want to work on the business. I think it's always like great to talk to your potential customers and just to make sure that you understand the problem. And maybe I would focus on that as opposed to like coming up with a solution. I think that's like a very clear next step, is to like come up with a solution and show it around. But I do think a deep understanding of your customer's problem and why it's a problem is really helpful sort of before you get going on a solution. I also do think that like when you're pitching someone, whether it's an investor or a potential customer, their guard is sort of up because no one likes being sold to, right? And so I always find it's easier to go in, and it's like puts less pressure on yourself and the other person when you really go in with a curiosity mindset and you're just trying to learn, right? It's like, please tell me, I'm curious about this. Is that a problem for you? Why is that a problem? Have you tried other things? Like, what have you tried to solve it? Why have those not been successful? And it's like a much more interesting conversation that takes like a lot of the sort of like salesmanship or like people's guard being up when you're just trying to understand a problem that they have.
You even said too, it's like amazing just how quickly things are happening and just the new problems that are arising every single day constantly. There was something we heard yesterday in a talk with Brad Feld, and he mentioned that there's like 3 pillars of great leaders and managers and how they encourage teams, especially fast scaling teams, to get work done. It's either it gets done fast, it's high quality, or it's not done on time. So it's like you can only pick the 2. It's like if you want it to be high quality, it's probably not going to get done fast. But if you want it done fast, probably not going to be high quality, done on time. So like, what is your approach to things have to move quickly, but how do you kind of manage a level of not perfection, but just great quality, good customer-centric ways of doing things, but doing it very quickly and iterating very quickly?
Yeah. And that's tougher in FinTech as well, right? When you're dealing with people's money, and trust is really important, and you don't want to break someone's trust. So I think it depends on what it is. If we're iterating on something, or we're like trying something that is completely not new, that we have like no idea whether it's going to work or not, it's definitely speed over quality. If we're iterating on something that 1 million people are going to see over the next week, then, the quality is higher, and definitely, both in terms of what the user experience is, as well as like the tech behind it to make sure that it's going to be able to scale and perform. So I think for us, it is like making sure that the team has the right context to understand. It's like, this is throwaway. It's possible it's not going to work. We have, we think there's like a 20% chance it's going to be something and an 80% chance it's going to fail. So don't put like a ton of time and effort into it. And also to reassure the team that if this is a thing and we're going to scale it, don't worry, we will rebuild it, and you can rebuild it to better quality. This is like, I think helping people understand this is like the one metric we're trying to find out. Are people interested? So like, don't worry about the rest. And maybe we're just building like a front end. Maybe we're not even building how it works. Or maybe the back end is an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet where we're just going to track things manually. We really just want to be, are people going to click on this? Are they interested? Are they going to go through a sign up flow? And so, I think just like really understanding like where we are in sort of like our product discovery.
What are also just some key things that you look for when, because it's very hard to invest like so much time and quality and like human power into generating something, and then it's like, you know, it's not getting traction. Customers aren't like maybe understanding it. They're operating it like using it wrong. Like when do you kind of make the call, and how do you identify like, okay, this is just, it's time to pivot, scrap this, and we need to focus on this? Like what are some of the signals or the signs that you identify when you make those pivots or decisions?
Yeah, it's super interesting because for every time it's like, oh, we just need to tweak this one thing, and all of a sudden like adoption really goes up. Like sometimes they're really small tweaks that make a major difference. So you're like, okay, do we keep trying that? And then other times you really are. It's like, oh no, you're just like beating your head against a wall and like nothing's going to happen. I think for us, it really is like a portfolio of things. If we want to be trying a number of things and you sort of like feed them all equally and see what happens. And then if one is like doing better than the other, it sort of gets more resources, right? And so I think for us, it's easier to do because you don't want to shut something off that is like not performing well if there's like nothing else to replace it, because that something is still better than nothing. So I think it is relative, and it's really, we really only like shut something down when we have something else that is actually like taking off to like make it, because it makes sense to sort of like try. Well, likely, if it's possible, it's like, okay, let's just keep this on, but let's like launch something else. We rarely like sort of completely turn things off. It's more just it gets like fewer resources or it goes into maintenance mode.
Right. Have you ever been surprised by something where, you know, you thought it was absolutely going to kill it in the market and then it flops?
Yeah, 100%. We launched a product that was a small dollar advance to help people pay for an unexpected bill, or maybe to like manage the mismatch that often happens because people get paid bi-weekly, but their bills come on like a different cycle. And so we had this product where it was like $50 or $100, again, small dollar loan for a small period of time on a subscription. And that was like very hard. It just like didn't really work out.
I want to, again, we'll make sure that there's an opportunity for questions, but hiring is just hugely important. And especially, I even am curious about like the very, very early years, because every single industry company startup is going to say like, oh, I had to hire this person right away. This was like the very key role. And sometimes it's salespeople. Sometimes it's like the technical people. Sometimes it's like, I've heard marketing too, which has been surprising for me. But in the Borrowell case, what was especially initially like became the really, really crucial teams that you had to build out? And was it maybe not obvious, or was it obvious?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me that you said that marketing surprised you. I would probably say it was like marketing for us, in that we are a direct-to-consumer product. We needed to get customers to come in, and marketing was really
something we hear often. I don't usually hear marketing, so that's why that's great.
Yeah. And then the interesting thing is, I do think, you know, people talk about like product-led growth. I do think that was, we sort of launched free credit score as a product to solve a marketing problem. So even though marketing was sort of that crucial area, I think we did use product to help solve it.
Again, like these conversations around just opportunities, and I think the fintech space in Canada is particularly interesting. What advice, like thinking globally, but also wanting to build something in Canada and utilizing, whether it's, you know, programs, grants, mentorship, accelerators, you name it, like what kind of resources should today's founders, and it doesn't have to be fintech related, it could just be anything you've been hearing, how should we be leveraging what we have in Canada to build and launch our ideas and launch our products and even gain traction globally?
I think one of the great things about Canada is that the tech ecosystem is like very open and friendly. And so one of the most important things for us was being part of an accelerator. And the reason for that is because it was basically shared workspace. I know a lot of accelerator programs today aren't about that. They're like not in person. So the advice I would give to early stage founders or any kind of founder is actually to find a community of other founders that you can uses group therapy, uses advice. I honestly think that's a big part of it, right? To your point around normalizing that failure is going to happen. I do think for me, having a group of other founders who I could go to, that we just like shared pretty openly with each other. I would say that the majority of that, what was helpful wasn't that they had a solution to my problem. What was helpful is that they had all gone through the same problem. And so again, it just like normalized the fact that, oh, we're not going through this because like I messed up or because, it's like something is like strangely wrong with like how we're running the business. It was just like a very normal thing. And I think whether it's for like mental health support or sometimes it's super pragmatic, I think having a community of other co-founders is really key.
Before we, I'll ask like Marcia if you have any questions too before we open it up. But what would your advice be to those that want to expand beyond Canada and like launch their products in? I know the US is a little bit like people are like build in Canada, buy Canada, all of that, but like we have to grow, like in order, to continue like the expansion of businesses, ideas, so on and so forth. What's your advice to break into other markets?
Yeah, go do it. Like I would like find the biggest market you can and sell there. You don't have to sell in Canada. We started out there, and now what's happened is that it makes sense for us on like a marginal basis to continue to invest in Canada because we have a brand, because we have all the infrastructure built. But I would say that if you're starting out, pick the biggest market.
One more quick one. What would be your advice to people who are, maybe just starting with entrepreneurship or looking to get into the fintech space, who feel that they maybe don't have like the right background for it, or maybe dealing with imposter syndrome? How do you get over that and, get started?
Yeah. So I definitely used to have imposter syndrome because I didn't have the typical background. I think there's a couple things. One is that if you're building something that hasn't been built before, no one has the right background to do it, right? And so no one has done it before. That's sort of the point. So just because your background, you may think it's not the right background, but no one will have the perfect background in one person to do it. So I would say you're no less qualified than anyone else. And then the other reason I don't have imposter syndrome is because I have a 14-year-old son who knows everything. He thinks he knows everything and he knows nothing. And so, I just, in comparison, I was like, oh, I shouldn't feel imposter syndrome. I should have like a quarter of the confidence that this 14-year-old boy has. And I joke, it's not that he knows nothing, but he's like so confident about being able to do everything. Yeah. And I actually think that like stands him in good stead because he like tries everything. He fails at a lot of things. It doesn't bother him. He just keeps going. And so, I would channel the confidence of like a 14-year-old bro and just go slay.
I think it's something too as like women we experience more, right? But that's a good one. Just go in as if you've already got the job. Like it's just like everything is already like working itself out. I love that. I think that's also a really great like point to end on. So just like want to open it up to the audience here.
I would like to learn a little bit more about your role as a co-founder and COO, especially in the early days, because
so the definition of COO was that I did all the other things that people didn't want to do, and sort of like that wasn't in their wheelhouse. I was really like the catch-all. I think that's continued to some degree, but we had a CTO who's very technical, CEO, my co-founder, who did a lot of the like investor relations, fundraising, like a lot of the external stuff. We had someone who was more in charge of, the financial side of things. And then I sort of did everything else. I think that's often the case with a co-founder like COO kind of role, is that you sort of like do things until you can actually hire an executive or hire someone to do that role. And then I would switch and find something else. The thing I really liked about it is that my job changed every 6 months, if not more frequently than that. I think it means that you are constantly having to learn new things and then like pass them off and then like learn something else that was new. But it was sort of like nice, I think, to, for others that there was this flexibility. And what I built up as my superpower was the ability to get up to speed really quickly and feel comfortable doing things I didn't know how to do.
Is it connected to the fact that you are a woman?
That's a good question because I was the only woman on the executive team, like in the early days when there were sort of 3 or 4 of us. I think partly, I don't know. It's like it's hard to know. I would say like I probably had the temperament where I was like happy to do anything, and maybe that wasn't the case. I think there was also maybe not the same level of comfort. I started out my career as a management consultant, and so the whole job was you had to get up to speed really quickly in whole new industries in the matter of a few weeks. And so I do think that I had a skill set and a comfort level to get up to speed quickly on areas.
Hi, Eva. So I had a quick question, and it was something that you mentioned a little bit earlier. You talked about how like while you were in the early stages of the startup, you had this like split where it was like you figured out the split where it was like you cared a lot about like the customer, the product, and everything that was working out, but at sometimes you kind of like shut that off, and it was like you also have to like not care too much at some point just to like balance that out as like your personal life and as you're like working. I'm not sure if I got the right idea, but I think that was like what was communicated. I just wanted you to kind of expand on that. Just because we're currently building our MVP and our product, and it's like we're spending like full time like every day and whatnot, and that's just kind of like we're still an undergrad, so we're like building it up. But of course, I think that split would be like something really really good to like catch on early. So just wanted to hear an expansion on it.
Yeah, I think what I tried to do was enforce some boundaries. And what I don't think is healthy is if when you're at work, you're worried about like family life. And when you're with your family, you're like worried about work. So I tried to separate out very much around like, okay, so what do I think if I take it's sort of like budgeting, right? It's like, what do I think I should be spending on housing or eating out or other things? Like, how much time do I think I should be spending on the business and how much time do I think I should be spending with my family? And then to be like pretty strict about those. And again, try not to have like work encroach on family life or family life encroach on work life. It was never perfect. Things are going to come up. And if there's an emergency at work, then I'm going to deal with it. But I think having, and I didn't do it on a day-to-day basis, but over a week and especially over a month, did I feel like that balance was right? And to try and enforce that. The good thing is that within my co-founders, we all had families and we all knew that getting a divorce was going to be very detrimental to the business. And so there was like business reason to also be, to be at home and investing in our spouses and kids. But like the pragmatism of that aside, I just think it's healthy. Like you do need a break from the business. You need to, come at things with excitement and with like freshness, and you need to be, getting enough sleep. So whatever that is like for you, and maybe it's like an hour a day, I'm not going to think about the business. It can be very small. I don't know what the number is, and it's going to look very different for each person. But whatever that is, I would just be like, okay, for an hour, I'm not going to think about the business. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work out. I'm going to see friends, whatever it is. I think that is like really healthy. And you actually come back with like, I think you'll come back with like new ideas and you'll be excited about the business. People can only work for a certain amount of time. And when you're young and excited and hungry, then maybe those are higher. But I also just think in the long term, you don't want to like, if you have a super successful business, but you have like no friends and no relationship with your family, are you successful? Like, is that, and it's like you're totally out of shape and you have no energy. Is that like a successful life? I would just think more broadly around what you want out of life and make sure that you're allocating time and resources to get the life that you want, not just the business that you want.
Hi, Eva. Thanks for the talk. My question is around how you transition from business school management consulting to a founder in a way that around communicating to your team or to customers. So that's the challenge I'm having. I come from 25 plus years of corporate executive, now doing a deep tech startup for the first time, and I'm getting no recognition of any of these mental frameworks that you're trying to consolidate and strategically communicate, and it's going nowhere, and rightfully so. I'm sorry, we're kind of early in this PMF journey, and so quick tips on how to just make it really conversable with people who can help and us helping them, especially tech customers.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can only imagine what it's like to transition from 25 years of management consulting, because I love frameworks. I love a 2x2 matrix. Do you know what I mean? I'm often up at the whiteboard. So I feel your pain. I think maybe like all communication, you really need to understand like how your audience hears you best and adapt your message to your audience. So there are times when a framework might be helpful, and there are lots of times when they're not. So yeah, I guess it's we could have a deeper conversation offline around like why you don't think it's hitting. Sometimes I think people, it's like, it's too theoretical. Do you know what I mean? It's like, just solve my problem, help me understand how I'm going to solve the problem. They don't want to have to, have a huge backstory around like how your framework works. But I think when frameworks are, can help simplify a complex problem, those are appropriate. I would just make sure that you're being thoughtful around who your audience is and what the setting is, and tailoring your communication for them.
My challenge is trying not to let people understand and rather just direct action. If that makes any sense. That sounds like terrible management, but or leadership. But you know what I mean? Like there's too much knowledge sharing versus action orientation, and at least that's what I'm thinking with my mental framework. So, have you experienced that challenge?
I think for us, one of the ways that we set direction for our team is through OKRs. So, there's lots of different goal setting frameworks. We happen to use OKRs, and we are very specific around it being a metric as opposed to a set of projects. And so we're trying to improve engagement this quarter by 10%, and people will brainstorm and come up with different ideas and try a bunch of different things, and a lot of them won't work. But it's more like helping provide guidance and direction, and say, this is the goal. It's to do this. And if it takes frameworks, that's great. But a lot of times it doesn't. It takes like a lot of experimentation and trial and error. And so that's something that's been helpful for us to drive action.
Okay, so on that note, I just want to say thank you. Again, I know it's sometimes not the easiest thing to talk about yourself and share just like really great opportunities for others and have them relate to you. But I think there's a lot of great pieces of information that people will find useful. So can I just get a round of applause, please, for Eva?
Thank you. And thank you too.
Thank you so much.